And so, beginning now with our long-awaited dialogue, attempting to cover and to make a coherent picture of the mysterious Spiral Odyssey, dealing with events symbolically represented here in our iconostasis in front of the lens. Queen Rania, myself as the dragon, Sebek, Mary the Apocalypse Child, the Prague Clock, Hathor standing in for Persephone, and various other shocking events. And what we should really begin talking about, at least for me, is my relationship with Sebek and how it grew out of my relationship with Joseph Smith, okay? Because Joseph Smith, the Mormon prophet, much misunderstood and maligned, fellow Freemason and mystic alchemical character, he had his own secret formula based on the balancing of the scales, becoming the double-headed god, and Sebek carried him away in his mythology into his world where he had his own afterlife and he was god of his own planet. And that's essentially the Mormon mythology, the space mythology that was later, kind of romanticized after Smith's murder. But his connection to Sebek was unknown to me at the time, strangely enough, because he was introduced to me, Smith, by Cleopatra, who I was having the cosmic visionary contacts with in 1998, right, through my use of the Abraxas magic square. And Cleopatra became the dominant force, synchronistically speaking, in collaboration with Dr. Carl Gustav Jung, my other puppeteer, and led me into a series of let's say, initiations wherein I finally got a hold of my understanding of the real meaning of a lot of the Egyptian symbolism, because during the old cosmic we had used our own meaning for it, not the meaning. So I was connecting to the collective, and under the premise of the goddess worship. Cleopatra was my doorway into that, and she then introduced me to Smith, who was also a spirit, kind of like a servant to her in her plot level, and Smith then introduced me to Sebek, and then I recalled again that Sebek had been present at my initial weighing of the conscience test, in 97. But I was introduced to Sebek by Smith in 2003, because I had interactions with Smith and various, weird encounters with the Mormons all throughout, from 98, 99, all throughout 2000, and then down here as well. But in 2002, I had interactions with Smith in around the same time that I was beginning to become obsessed with Queen Rania. Smith was telling me to go into Freemasonry, and he was arranging cosmic events pointing me into Freemasonry. And Sebek, at that time, was still not on the scene. It was just Smith and I and Cleopatra, and it was all about the Hyperspatial, the Egyptian mandala, where you have yourself as the double-headed god, and you have all the parts of yourself expressed in the different formulae around it, and it forms the map or pattern for your whole island.
Wow.
For both it forms the map or pattern for two things. Smith didn't know this, but I know it. It forms the map or pattern fractally for your memory palace at the center of the island and the island as a whole. Okay? Just as the 12 years from 2000 to 2012 are shaped by the same pattern that shapes the whole 26,000 year cycle. Fractal resonance. Yes, you see. And so, the hypocephalus is a good way of getting your hand on that pulse of the fractal resonance and using it to order your own self and achieve the hyperspatial body, right? And what happened is that the tutelage, which I was going under with Smith, climaxed into various scenarios leading up to the induction into Freemasonry, and then as a reward, Cleopatra, at the same time as I was having the interactions with Smith, Cleopatra reorganized my memory palace into a more efficient and cosmically resonant structure, which included a temple complex, right, an ancient Egyptian temple complex, and then I went into that temple complex with Smith as my guide and confronted Sebek. And he had the testing. Remember, it's happened in January, February of 2003. I was talking to you about it because I was first getting to know you at that time.
So we're talking on the phone.
Now, can you tell me what you remember about that? Who I was, what I was doing at that time? I need a break for a moment.
Who you were at the time.
Yeah, when I was telling you about that, I told you about it, right?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't assuming anything about you at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I was confronting something very unique. And I was hearing things that I've never heard before and said in such a way that was astounding.
Astounding!
Yes. But I have a connection to Sebek, and that is that Sebek is my maiden name.
Your family name, right?
Yeah.
And you had coincidentally gone to the temple of Sebek. Now tell me about that, because I met you at the same time that I met Sebek. I met you.
Yep.
Right, providentially arranged. Once Cleopatra built my palace, I had the contacts with Sebek at the same time that I met you, because all that was led to the Queen Rania connection. We'll get into Queen Rania in a moment, but tell me about your Sebek trip to the temple I ended up
I went
with.
to Egypt in late November 2000. And we did a week-long tour, which included most of the temples, well, the most known temples along the Nile. And we had a stop at Komombo late in the evening, so it was dark outside. And it was very mesmerizing walking around, because everything's lit up by the lights kind of on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
So it illuminates all the pillars and the walls.
And Sebek, the crocodile god, is everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like his gateway to the secret underworld, that temple. An interface where the priest would go.
Mm-hmm.
Did they tell you anything about the temple? Or you just were there showing up just to see it?
We actually didn't have a tour guide, not at all. It was, we had a tour leader. So he wasn't about showing us and guiding us in every temple. That's part of another person's job. There are usually like the real Egyptians around the temples. And they're these mysterious figures that they just sit around and walk around and, either help tourists with questions. It's really interesting.
Oh. Okay. And
Who
so
are they? Yeah.
Yeah, who are they? Indeed.
What did they know?
What do they know? So, what was your thinking about the crocodile god and your connection to it being your name at that time? Were you thinking about that at all? As a kind of, whoa, what's happening?
Yeah, no, not really, no.
Oh yeah, you just thought it was cute and curious?
Well, yeah, obviously, but as I know now, it was kind of like a unpopped quiff. So I really didn't want to focus on it.
Indeed. I see. Now, for me then, when I was meeting Sebek in 2003, this kind of shocked me, let's say charged me. There was one particular point where Sebek put his jaws around my head. And when I say my head, I mean my astral double. My astral self, my imagination. Your imagination and your astral body are the exact same thing. When you see something with your imagination, what you're doing is you're pushing your consciousness into your astral body, which can see and interface with anything that you can imagine.
Wow.
Dun, dun, dun. You're double. You're Ka to the Ba of the body.
Mm-hmm.
The Ba is the body, the Ka is the astral double. But anyway, so that's the Egyptian thing again. But so for me with Sebek, he shocked me, and I had to confront him. And Smith was kind of like challenging me to go for it, and I didn't know who Sebek was at that time. Now, however, I know it was me. I am the god Sebek. I was actually at my own testing, weighing of the conscience.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting about that is there are two versions of me there. So now this is the third version of me, because in 2001, during the Ghost Capital times, I made contact with the Men in Black, right? Well, they made contact with me. One of whom was the Dark Elf, who turned out to be my reincarnation self from, after my Atlantis lifetime, my Dark Elf lifetime, or some kind of alchemy mixture in the soul level. That's as yet to be determined. Anyway, there was a series of events where the Men in Black were coming around my magic square and quizzing me and challenging me and drawing out different parts of my past for me to confront. And I got sucked by them into that one moment in 1997 when I actually had the visionary experience, one of my first experiences with the magic square. I had the visionary experience of the scales and confronting the scales, right?
Yeah.
Anubis was there and my heart was weighed and the balancing act, and then Sebek appeared. But now I know that Sebek is actually me. But at the time, too, with these Men in Black encounters, I got sucked back into it and I went back and observed that again. So the Men in Black, for some reason, wanted me to observe that again and create a loop where, oh, you know what it was? This is what it was. There was a action I was going to try to take initially. Get this. This is, you want to talk about fucked up, okay? When I first had this weighing of the conscience experience, okay, my heart, when I took it out, wasn't a, heart like in the Egyptian jar with the heart in it. It was actually the double tetrahedron jewel of judgment, right?
Wow.
Yeah. And I placed that on the scales, okay? And I balanced the scales and Sebek appeared, and I went to grab the stone again to try to take it with me when I was going to go away with Sebek. And somebody in the crowd yelled, "Don't do it!" Right? And so I stopped, and I didn't do it in 1997, right? And then in 2001, the Men in Black take me back to that, and they say to me, "You're supposed to grab that stone now. If you grab it in 1997, all your opportunities for using it are lost, so don't let your 1997 self grab it. Don't let him do it." And so I yelled, "Don't do it!" Right? And my 1997 self at that moment turned back, what? And didn't do it and went off with Sebek, right?
Yep.
And so, and then the crowd leaves, right, when I went off with Sebek, and then the Men in Black and I go and I take the stone then, the jewel then, right? So it's one of those weird scenes that, it's like the background, the event happened in 1997. A weird thing happened during the event where I yelled, "Don't do it," or somebody yelled, "Don't do it," and I didn't take the jewel from the scales, right? So I took it essentially out of my heart and placed it on the scales. And then, the voice yelled, "Don't do it." I left it there and went with Sebek, and then the crowd of the spirits of the dead who were gathering around me, Cleopatra, Young, etc., everybody, right, had been gathered there, and then they left once I left with Sebek. But what I didn't know at the time is that after they left, the me from 2001 then showed up with the Men in Black. We had been watching it from the sidelines the entire time. But it hadn't happened yet in 97. But in 2001, it happened. They took me back and I observed it, and they urgently told me I had to yell at that moment. And I yelled it, not even realizing it. And then later I realized that was me that I had heard at that point. That's a time loop.
Yeah.
The Men in Black time loop. Anyway, Sebek and I had a brief encounter then in 97. It was me, tutoring myself. And then what happened then is that kicked off my goddess contacts, that first encounter with Sebek, strangely enough. And then later, in 2001, when I encountered the scales again, right, outside my memory palace, I had the scales permanently there. Because during 97, I descended into the realm of the mother's scenario with Cleopatra and confronted the scales there, right, descending into the astral earth. Mm-hmm. But this time now, when she built the memory palace modifications, and it had contacted me again in 2001, I had the scales permanently outside my magic square, right? And they were like a permanent. So in other words, I passed the test in 97, achieved that level with Sebek of the independent plane of consciousness, and that's what led to the island of self, all that stuff in the book, which I then wrote, the Babylon 5 book, which I wrote in 98, and all that stuff about the island of self, the hyperspace self. That's expressing that kingdom. Again, Smith was using that same formula, and that's what he was talking about when he talked about how each individual will become a god and become the master of their own Genesis scenario, right? And Genesis creating their own hyperspace world, essentially. And for me, it was the island of self. And what happened is that I had a mastery of that, let's say, over that period between 97 and 2001. I achieved total mastery of it. And I broke out into the next collective level, which is what the Ghost Capital represents. But before I could enter that level, I had to have my scales permanently in my attention, let's say, in my home base of the Memory Palace. Okay? In other words, that scales testing represents that borderline of entering my own mastery of my own kingdom. Before that testing is my old cosmic self, my old limitations, my old ego, right? And none of that can be present if I'm going to confront the big cosmic. So I have to have the scales always outside the magic square to always be reminding me to keep it in balance.
That's very right.
Keep my... And so there's two lessons with the scales, right? One is that myself equals the double tetrahedron, which is actually made up of 7 triangles. Each triangle representing one of the 7 planets harmoniously working together as the jewel. And that's in balance with the feather of the law. The feather from Isis's, wings. The feather, when it's alone, is called the feather of Ma'at, the law. And those are the feathers you see in Sebek's headdress as well. Right? And so anyway, it's all tied up in this Egyptian mythology coming alive and, kicking me to the next level. And then that's when I met you. And then what happens in 2003 then, after I meet Sebek for the final time with the initiation, passing the test, the jaws, my next, Memory Palace configuration, my decision to go to Australia, all these destiny threads kicked in. By going to Australia and following you, following the Queen Rania path. No, the Queen Rania path appeared at the same time as, the Memory Palace was finished in 2002, right? Queen Rania appears everywhere, assaulting me synchronicitously. And I begin to understand the Apocalypse Woman formula. And how with the apocalypse of unfolding the red and blue confrontation, Queen Rania is the purple figure, the Islamic, West meeting together, etc., synthesis of the East and West, etc., and all that comes into play in 2002, and I begin to follow her, and that's what leads me to you. Now, can you briefly just tell what that was like for you, meeting me for the first time in 2002 with the Queen Rania connection? How weird it was?
It was. But it was so magical too.
Yeah.
So potent and controversial as well.
Controversial.
Yeah. Where's this guy coming out of America?
Yep.
Everyone was concerned.
Oh, but it turned out so well, didn't it? Destiny threw us together, and we're serving now, the plot level now is about serving Queen Rania's mission of creating the new cosmic world. And in order to facilitate that, I underwent the transformation in 2003 into the dragon, the hyperspace dragon. Okay, the blue hyperspace dragon, in a series of visions that began immediately following the Sebek confrontations, because they happened in February, and then I flew here in March. And when I arrived in March, that's when the dragon manifestations began to happen. And then I returned, and I finally mutated. This is what happened. This is the way it unfolded. The Sebek material happened in February, the final confrontation. I come here in March. That's when I had the first cosmic visions of Queen Rania and Bush and Bin Laden, right? And in the cosmic visions, Queen Rania first appears as the Apocalypse Woman, and I see her pursued by the Blue Dragon. But I don't know that the Blue Dragon is actually trying to catch me, not her, because that Blue Dragon is me.
Yep.
Because in the Apocalypse, the Red Dragon, the evil one, the Blue Dragon pursuing her is me. And what happens is I go back, I have the month of Paradise here with you in March into April. I go back, and then May on the total eclipse is when I confront that vision again. I realize I'm the dragon, and I become the dragon. I turn and face it, and it becomes me.
And you get the jewel.
And I got, that's when Queen Rania gives me the jewel of the Nabateans. Queen Rania, as the Apocalypse Woman, hands me the jewel. And this is, again, the Jewel of Judgment theme. But now the idea is that the Jewel of the Nabateans is some kind of key that will unlock the secret door. Right? And where's the secret door? The secret door, it turns out, was in the Tower of Babel, which is the Atlantean archive. Because in the myth of the Tower of Babel in the Old Testament, it supposedly is the first civilization's greatest achievement. And at that time, there's only one civilization. Everybody speaks the same language. Everything is unified in a man's glorious pursuit of his own hard-on. Okay? And the Tower of Babel is built too perfectly and contains too much of a record, and it represents that reaching for too much of the Atlantean civilization. So it's smacked down, it's destroyed. And this is right around the time of the flood, coincidentally enough. Anyway, and what happens is that the languages have been confused and split off into all these different languages after that destruction of that tower. So the restored tower is waiting, or was waiting, in Babel, which was Babylon. Okay, locked. And the key need to unlock it was the Nabatean gem. But the Nabatean gem itself had to be unlocked. It had 9 shards within it, the Nabatean gem. And those 9 shards, 1 shard for each of the stops on the Spiral Odyssey.
What's a shard?
A shard, if you have a gem, it's like a crystal. And a shard is a part of the gem. It's like a gem or a diamond has almost like chambers inside within it, prism-like chambers. And that's when you see you can see the pattern of geometric shapes within a diamond.
Okay.
Those are actually different shards within it. If it were to break, a diamond usually doesn't break, but a lesser gem, if it breaks into the shards, like quartz, for example.
Yep.
Okay. So in the Nabatean gem, there are 9 shards. Each one of them had to be charged, let's say, by the goddess figure of each of the 9 stops on the Spiral Odyssey. Now, what is the Spiral Odyssey? It turns out, let's trace these events carefully, because I haven't looked at it all at once yet. Queen Rania appears as the Apocalypse Woman in March of 2003. I become the Blue Dragon in 2003's May total lunar eclipse. Okay, and the eclipse again is symbolic of the Queen Rania's Apocalypse Woman attributes, because she has the sun and the moon in eclipse. She's standing on the moon while she's cloaked with the sun. And as we were talking about before, her attributes of the Apocalypse Woman involve a manipulation of the threads of reality using the sun and the Eye of Ra aspect to the sun. And what's the Eye of Ra? It's symbolic of the cosmic strings that puppeteer reality and arrange things. And you see in the disc of the Ra disc with the eye, okay? The eye is inside the circular disc, and coming out of the disc like rays are lines, and at the end of the lines are hands handing you the Ankh, handing you various things. And in my timeline of my life, I have that. But the idea is that Queen Rania, by having the cloak of the sun, has these rays, the puppeteering strings, coming off, and she can magically manipulate them. And you know what? I think maybe her use of fashion, listen to this, okay? Her use of fashion and the language of wearing specific clothing might be some kind of code that relates to using the strings that emanate from the cloak. In other words, let's say the cloak has many different forms it can take, like a quiff being popped, right?
Yeah.
And so that the different outfit would be a different string arrangement popping the quiff, let's say. And you can look at her manipulation of the collective consciousness as these strings reaching out. And fashion is an expression of the secret code expressing that. But the clothing that she's wearing representing an eclipse of consciousness. The old and new coming together, the Alpha Omega age of the apocalypse itself. And the Apocalypse Woman being the most mysterious and controversial figure of the apocalypse per se, because she represents the end of the entire era that the apocalypse is telling you about. And her child, the apocalypse child, which is Mary, the yin-yang faced apocalypse child, he is the figure who is her child when she's fleeing the dragon, the evil dragon. And that Mary is going to be the inheritor of the new world left over after the apocalypse plays out. So Mary is a post-apocalyptic figure, beyond the opposites, beyond all the old-new dichotomy, totally new. Not about the old-new battle that we're dealing with, but he's totally new. After that battle's over, you know?
Yep.
And Queen Rania has the bridge, the purple bridge for that. So in order for her to have the gem which will unlock the Tower of Babel where Mary needs to go, Mary's destiny, this is where he is right now, is to enter the Tower of Babel and collect those secrets and have the new plan, the new program for the new era. And this is what is going to be handed to the space gods. Okay? And you know what?
What?
I know a secret.
What is it?
The mountain in Petra,
Yep.
where the tomb of Aaron is buried. I think that mountain may be hollow, and there's some kind of secret treasure chamber that's only accessible through a secret passage leading from the tomb of Aaron down into steps leading into the mountain, and it's connected to a secret Nabatean treasure house.
What?
You know how I know that?
How?
Mary just kind of sent me an image of it as I was looking at him in the corner of my eye as I was describing him here.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Because remember, I'm with Mary right now in the Tower of Babel.
Yep.
In my Templar armor. So I'm constantly kind of in pseudo contact with him on that plane. And since I've been thinking about it in the last few days, I'm more tuned into it. Because it's always happening, but usually I'm just kind of cut off from it, like if I'm at work or whatever, I'm not thinking about it. So it's a barrier, it's distant, it's zipped, it needs to be unzipped, which is probably what we're doing now for the first time, unzipping all this. But anyway, so what happens is that I become the blue dragon in May of 2003. And Queen Rania tells me that now as the blue dragon, we're going to go on a journey that's going to last 1 year of linear time, and in May of 2004, coincidentally right before our wedding.
Huh.
Okay?
Yep.
And this journey will take us from the apocalyptic wilderness where we are at this point in May of 2003, says Queen Rania at the time. It'll take us from there to the Judgment City, and then on the Spiral Odyssey towards the Tower of Babel at the center, okay? And each of the 9 stops on the Spiral Odyssey are for our way of capturing the essence of, say, of each 9 of the 9 main threads, 9 main types of threads in the Destiny Weave, okay? Yeah. So the 9 shards of the Nabatean gem are means of controlling the 9 threads that are in the Destiny Weave of the historic post-apocalyptic carpet.
Wow, that's big.
Alright, I gotta take a breather here, so tell me your impressions.
No, can we pause for please?
We can't pause because it'll start another video.
Oh.
Okay, so just give me some kind of comment.
Wow, what can I comment on?
Oh, but the idea of the threads there that I just said, that's new. I haven't thought that before. The carpet, like a prayer carpet, like the prayer carpet we have there. The carpet of reality. Post-apocalyptic thinking.
Maybe I'd rather pause.
And do what?
I need to pee too.
You do? Well, go ahead. And I'll do some zooming and babbling while you do that. Okay? It'll start another video, though.
Is it my time?
I guess not. Okay, that's not working for some reason.
There? Not here. How you stop it, right?